Hi, I'm here to talk about the Family Law Act and separating in BC and some of the um, good things about it, some of the bad things about it. I'll do some things I like and then some things I really don't like, things that we can change. But first of all, you might be here because you're like, oh, I'm separated in BC. What do I do? Um, yeah, get independent legal advice. I am not a lawyer. I am a student, a law student, but I cannot provide independent legal advice. You should go get that. So I'm going to put that out there now. At the moment, my credentials are the same as anyone else, but I am just going to put out there what I've learned so far and like some major issues that we have, which have to do with complexity. So basically, I'm going to start out with like a basic overview of like what governs separating and divorce in BC and where it's came, like the history of it and where it's going, where I hope it goes, anyways. So yeah, let's dive into the history and because it's obviously super important. So the history of the Family Law Act. So the Family Law Act is what governs separating in BC. It governs separation of assets. It governs common law relationships. It basically encompasses like if you've been living with somebody for 2 years or more, and you guys are engaged in a marriage like relationship, so you're hooking up and you live together, then you become common law. And then once you become common law, you're basically opted into a contract with this person where you're going to have an asset split and all this other fun stuff of anything you've earned while you guys were living together and hooking up. Obviously, by my language, you can probably tell I'm a bit biased towards not liking the way the system works right now. And we're going to get into that, but I'm going to try to keep this video short. Hopefully I can get it in like 35 minutes, so maybe I'll talk faster. But let's go into the history a little bit, as I think the history is pretty important, understanding like where it came from. So Family Law Act, it was put forward by Shirley Bond. She was the Attorney General, I believe, at the time. And she put it forward because before that we had like, I believe it's called the Family Relations Act or something. It was like this very just not good act. I didn't like it very much. I had read the historical text. I'll provide it in the link. By the way, if any of the stuff that if you're interested in any of the stuff I'm talking about, you can go in and read it. But yeah, basically, she put it forward to try to fix situations which were pretty. Some of them, especially in terms of common law, were pretty particular. Like, for example, they brought forward somebody that had given everything up and joined the farm of somebody and given up everything, and then found out after separating that they had nothing. They had no interest in the farm, and they basically gave up their whole career. And during the Hansard debates, which I'll put in there, you can read them if you're super interested in Hansard debates. I am because I like politics, but they're talking about like how they should have an interest, but they didn't have an interest, and how some people wouldn't get married and they'd remain in common law or dating somebody, so they didn't have to be obligated to give them money. So they had written that in there, but a lot of the instances they were pretty extreme, in my opinion. They were like far end stuff, which should be captured by the Family Law Act, but they brought it all the way down to 2 years. Okay, and this is my major beef with the thing, or my major problem with the Family Law Act, is that it forces you to have a contractual common law marriage, pretty much, with somebody after only 2 years. And I find that to be like, if you live with someone for 2 years, I find that to be a little extreme. My opinion, that's a lot. That's a lot. Like, what an awkward conversation, right? Your girlfriend moves in, or boyfriend, and then a year later, you're like, "We need a cohab agreement because we're about to opt into the Family Law Act, and officially, we're now partners in terms of all of our money." Given the way things are going, like maybe this made sense in the whole farming thing like years ago, or maybe people got ripped off like 20, 30 years ago. But I think like nowadays we're headed as a society, it's not really that useful anymore. I mean, it can be, but maybe like more extreme. Maybe move it from like 2 years to 5 years. Most people, when I talk to them and I'm like, hey, you realize that like you guys lived together for a year, so you guys are gonna be common law soon, meaning all your assets, everything are gonna be mixed. All your gain in assets, I should say. So say if you bought a house and it's worth 100,000 when you first moved in with this person, and now it's worth 500,000 because our market's insane, and then it's been 2.5 years. You break up, they move out. The gain, the $400,000 gain, down the middle. So yeah, and then plus, who's gonna buy a house for 100,000 here? I mean, we know it's not happening, but that's not what I'm talking about today. So, anyways, they tried to solve inequities, and they had brought forward pretty extreme cases of somebody together for 20 years, and they obviously they never got married, and maybe they had kids, and then everything got messed up because before they used to go by contribution. So they would go, well, how much money did he or she actually put towards that house? Because that is what they're going to get back. And of course, if you have children with somebody, I can see that being a problem. The benefit of family law act, as soon as you have kids, even if you just moved in together and then you have kids a month later, which I mean could happen. I guess, yeah, if you have a relationship on the outside. But anyway, in that case, that makes a lot of sense. You got a kid, and as soon as you throw kids into the mixture of this family law stuff, everything gets really messy really fast. So I definitely agree with capturing children or having capturing children. Poor language skills, but I definitely agree with capturing the relationship once children have been brought into the equation. Sorry, that's just funny. Because obviously, yeah, things change when you have kids, and now you have all this additional domestic labor. So yeah, but anyways, they had brought that in, but I felt they were a little extreme, and it should be changed. And they tried to change a lot of the legislation to push benefits of the child. Basically, like to deal with family violence, to deal with the court really looking at like what is the best interest of the child. That's like a big term they kept throwing it out there. What's the best interest of the child, and how to deal with like out of court stuff. How are we going to deal with mediation and justice counselors and all that other stuff. So the family law act like really gathered that, like I found to be good. And then there's the Divorce Act. So say you were actually married and you're divorcing. Well, obviously if you're married and you like sign a contract with this person and you're agreeing to like split everything, then like clearly you should split everything. I don't know, my opinion. Unless like you guys had like a separate deal, which is essentially a prenup, right? It's just a contract that you guys have where you don't split everything and you go by contribution. You can do whatever you want, but when you sign a contract with marriage, you should probably abide by that contract, in my opinion. Aside from any side deals that you have, obviously non-pressured, but like aside from any deals that you might have on like a certain property or whatnot. But yeah, the Divorce Act, so that was majorly amended in 1985, so I'll provide that link. But before that, you used to have an at-fault marriage system. So imagine that you had to be separated for like 3 years before you can divorce somebody. Now it's only 1 year, which is good, but you had to like write reasons, like why are you divorcing them? Well, they cheated on me, or they stabbed me. And then in that case, it's like, oh, you were stabbed. Okay, well then now we can grant you divorce because that sucks. But like now it's no fault, so you don't have to prove any of that. Like courts, the whole system separating everything's awful, which we're gonna get into hopefully quickly because I'm already 8 minutes in. But the whole system's awful in my opinion, anyways. So it's good to try to make it a little bit easier. So they made that, and then they had a more recent amendment to the Divorce Act that was pushed forward by Judy Wilson Raybould. I think that's how you pronounce the name. She did a lot of good work actually, but she got thrown out of the Liberal caucus for the SNC Lavalin stuff. I don't know if you're interested in like politics, like clearly I am, but she had done that, and she ran it independent, and she spent like, was it 2015? I think she spent like $120,000-ish on her campaign in the Vancouver Granville area, and she won. She continued as an independent, but then when they called that new election, was it 2015 or is it 2019? Well, they called the new election, and then during the new election cycle, she was like, she just quit. She didn't die. She just quit. She didn't like it anymore. But yeah, I think she did a lot of good work pushing that forward. The Divorce Act really, really pushed the best interests of the child, and it got rid of like the adversarial thing about law, like family court, essentially, where you're dealing with like the plaintiff and the defendant. Like, it sounds pretty extreme to me when you like have people breaking up. Like, someone's a defendant now. I mean, but they changed it, right? You got applicant and respondent, and then you got like instead of this person's won custody, which would be like something they would say, they were like, well, no one really wins in court, so we're gonna say that it's, instead of winning custody, we're gonna do parenting time, and then we're gonna say that this is your parenting responsibilities and all that stuff. So the act is pretty good. I felt that they did some pretty good stuff to the Divorce Act. It probably still has some more things they could work on, particularly keeping people out of court. It's probably something they should really, really, really invest in if they want to have best interest for the child, in my opinion. But yes, anyways, so there's the, I guess, basic introduction of the system, the laws. So if you're separating and you're in BC and you're like, okay, am I married? It's going to be one of the first things you ask yourself. Am I married? I can't remember. I am married. That means I'm going to go under the Divorce Act because I'm married. And we're going to kind of do a mixture of the Divorce Act and the Family Law Act, because the Divorce Act is going to deal with like the kids and all that stuff, and the divorce itself, right? Because you got to be granted an order for divorce in the Supreme Court. And then the or is it going to be the Family Law Act? Are we going to deal with division of assets and all that stuff, which still has to go through the Supreme Court. The provincial court only deals with like children issues, basically like family. They call them family management conferences. Hopefully, I'm not confusing you. Yeah, this is a lot of information to give. Like lot. But at the end of the day, that's the purpose of why I'm actually doing this, is because this is all a part of my argument. It's to say how complicated it is, how much it sucks, and how much like you're re-traumatizing somebody that's breaking up in a family by having to get dragged through the court system. The whole thing's awful. And even if like you guys completely agree on everything, it's still awful. And if you disagree on one thing, it's just all around an awful system. Separations suck and divorces suck. So, so again, some good things about it are exactly that they really push the best interest of the child, or they try to. I mean, that needs to be considered. It's not the child that's divorcing. It's not the child that's separating. If you're with somebody and you have a kid, the child is pretty much just like a bystander, and their whole lives are changing now because of the situation, which really is pretty crappy for them. But then there's a lot of bad things about it, which like, okay, I'll just get into that now. Let's go into the next part as to why the system is just not broken, but like how it could be a lot better. Okay, so now you're separated and you have children and you're in BC. Again, ask yourself, are you married? Are you not married? Let's say you're not married, okay? And you're just going to deal with like just strictly the Family Law Act. So you're not married. Now you got to deal with when did you guys get together? When did you begin your marriage or like relationship? You got all these questions you got to ask in terms of asset division. And then you got to fill out all these forms. Like if you're dealing with like the Supreme Court, which is practically impossible to navigate as a normal person. Like unless you're a lawyer and if you're gonna walk in the Supreme Court, for one, everyone's gonna keep turning you around. They're gonna be like, hi, get a lawyer. That's basically what's gonna happen. You're gonna go into Hornby Street, 800 Hornby, and you're gonna go talk to the guy. There's gonna be a security guard. Well, it's usually a guy there, but it could be a girl sometimes. But anyways, and they're gonna tell you, yeah, just go use that little broken phone that looks like somebody like peed on it in the corner, and that actually is what it looks like. And then you can go there and you talk to legal aid, who will be like, how much money do you make? You make too much money because you have a job. And then you're done. Do you have a house? If you do, sell that first and then get a lawyer. So it's obviously pretty traumatizing to walk in there. Your alternative option is to go to the much cheaper and easier to navigate provincial courthouse, which is across the street. So you can walk down there, go down the escalator, and then go downstairs, and then you could be like, okay, so what do I do? Well, for one, they're going to send you upstairs to the left, and then they actually have a family law little clinic where they have justice access counselors, which are going to help you. They're going to tell you like, well, hey, this is what you do. These are how you fill out the forms, and maybe we'll get you access to a justice counselor. You're going to have to do that pretty quick because, well, for one, you can't even go to a family management conference unless you've seen a justice counselor. So you're going to have to try some sort of mediation. Otherwise, yeah, again, they're not going to do it. And you have to take this parenting after separation course, which is like this really crappy cartoon of like them telling you not to fight in front of your kids, basically, or like smash talk the other partner. Because it's just, again, kids are like innocent bystanders in the whole situation. When kids are involved, it just sucks. Like for the kid, they basically don't get anything. They just get a bunch of fighting and whatever. So it's basically trying to tell you not to traumatize your children. That's like the whole video is like a continuous, don't traumatize your kids, don't traumatize your kids. And then when you're done, you can try the mediation. So you talk to a justice counselor who's not going to deal with any sort of asset separation, but they can deal with what's going to happen to your kids. So if you're worried about like, oh, I have a child, like how are we going to figure custody? Just go talk to one, and then the other person's going to talk to one. You're going to meet separately, and then they're going to try to work something out, and then they can even draft a separation agreement. So as long as it doesn't deal with assets, so as long as it's not dealing with money, but it's dealing with like parenting time and all that stuff, all that fun stuff, they can deal with it. So probably the first place you're going to want to go is to that Justice Access Center, and then they can like start helping you, which probably I'd say is like the most important thing for a lot of people, because one of the first things that's going to pop up in somebody's head is like, how much money is this going to cost? Which is like the problem, right? So that's where we get into some of my issues with the whole system. Holy, is there a limitation to access for justice? It is so hard unless you're rich. Like, I mean, I'm talking rich. If you want to take someone to a trial, it's like $100,000 to take somebody to trial if you disagree about something. That is horrible. And so you have to like, yeah, again, like how can you afford a lawyer like that? And like, even if you want to just start talking and like start figuring out this kind of stuff, you got to throw like 20 grand on a lawyer to get like 2 affidavits done. Again, if you don't know what an affidavit is, it's just basically like a statement. Usually you have to do it in support of like an application. So if you're doing an interim order, yeah, you see how hard this is? I'm trying to explain it, but like, I feel like people are probably going to get lost, but it's okay. That's the whole point, actually. So wait, actually, we're going to take a break. 1 sec. All right. Sorry for that abrupt break, but this is a lot to talk about. So let's get into the good things, bad things. Again, I was just telling you some of the good things, but bad things. This whole system is overly complex. Like, it is insane. There are so many freaking rules. Like, I'll walk you through the process, okay? Just a little bit so you have an idea of what someone goes through. You basically get like re-traumatized by the system. And like keeping in mind, like even when you're talking to a judge, they're like at this like on this huge like table at the very top, like looking down on you, like I control everything. And you basically you're sitting there like, what do I do? And if you got a lawyer that you paid 20 grand for, they can talk for you, but then they just charged you $1,500 to be like, we submit that they should be paid this for child support, right? You do an application, but anyways. It's way too complicated. So let's deal with what happened. So you go to the Justice Access Center. Let's go with provincial court. Okay, provincial court I find to be easier if you are interested in like starting somewhere and you have no money and you don't want to worry about asset division, or say there's not a lot of money, but your primary concern right now is dealing with like the kids and dealing with like what are we going to do with the kids? How are we going to set up everything? And again, no money. You can go down to the courthouse. You go down to 800 Horby, go down the stairs, go left, and then they're going to have a desk. And then they're going to tell you all you need to know about well, they won't tell you all you need to. They'll tell you how to file the forms. They'll be like, okay, here's your paper. And then you fill it out. And then it asks for your financials. So you have to submit everything. And then you also, after everything's submitted, they're going to want to see there's a few things they're going to see: that you've done the parenting after separation course and that you've seen a justice access counselor, which is in the same building. And then once you've done all that, then they're going to say you got to serve the other person. You're going to have to use a process server or a friend. It can't be you. And they can just serve them in person. Then they have to do an affidavit of personal service. But at least a lot of that stuff, other than the process server, a lot of that stuff can be free, and they will take your affidavit. Affidavit is just like a sworn statement that you give that the judge like needs. Sometimes they read it ahead of time, or they just need it in front of them when they're like making a decision, especially an interim order. Interim just means like temporary order. So when they're making that, they're going to need like these affidavits in front of them so they can decide like how to proceed in this case. This generally happens in a family management conference if you're not going to trial. But so this is like actually the easiest system that I'm telling someone to deal with. You go down, you get everything done, you serve them, and then you submit all your papers. Then they're going to send you both a letter. It's going to come with the mail, and it's going to say, you have a family management conference by MS Teams. Here's the link, and it's going to be on October 23rd, 2024. Yeah, well, they usually set it like 2 months ahead. Anyways, and then you're going to attend that, and then they're going to make the orders for spousal support. They're going to make the orders for, and it's going to be in-term spousal, in-term child support. And they're going to do this by looking at the tables. Okay. And then they're basically going to look at both your tax returns, and then they're going to be like, well, do you guys consent? It's much easier if you guys consent to it, but they'll be like, do you guys consent to having this order set? So you're going to pay this much, right? But it even gets more complicated. And another thing people don't understand is like, what if you're 50-50? So of course, if one person has 100% of the time, it's going to be a lot easier to figure out what you have to pay them, or at least like logically, you have to pay this person because they have your child. But if you're 50-50, it's a common misconception that it's going to be split down the middle and that you don't have to pay this other person. That's not how it works at all. I'll give you a very basic example. Person A, 100,000 a year income. Person B, 50,000 a year income. And they both have the child, 50-50. Let's say exactly 50-50 to don't mess with anything. 100,000 to 50,000, you have what's called special expenses, okay? This is hilariously complicated. You have special expenses. Special expenses mean like they have to get their teeth worked on because they got a cavity. They have to go to the doctor. They maybe have basketball and they need to be in it. It really benefits them. So that's a special expense. Sports, whatever. RESPs don't count as a special expense. If you wanted to try to claim that, won't work. But anyways, so see, there's another random rule. But anyways, so special expenses, rather than it being 50-50, which a lot of people might think, it actually ends up being 66-33 because this person makes 100,000, this person makes 50, so they have to pay double because they make double what this person makes. Makes sense. And then now you're like, okay, well then how does child support work? Like who pays who? Well, actually, you pay each other. That's the simplest way to put it. So 100,000, you assume that this person has a child full time that only makes 50, and then whatever this person's calculated to have to pay 100, so say that's like $800 a month, boom, 800 that way. Okay, and now we go the other way. We pretend this person has the child 100% of the time, this person doesn't have it, and let's say 400 goes that way. 800, 400 divides up. You like my hand action? Divides up. Now we have 400 one way. So that gets dealt with first. So 400 goes one way, even if you're 50-50, and you have to pay double the special expenses because you make double. That's the first thing. Unless there's even more unlesses. There's more nuances. We got imputings of income. We got like hardship, undue hardship that could happen. There's like a whole bunch of stuff that could modify this. But for simplicity's sake, let's just let's just try to make it simple without getting too complicated. Again, I find this overly complicated, which is my big problem with this whole system. So now you have that. Now you have spousal. Okay, so you split after 10 years. You made double this person. Now, clearly, they're going to have to move out. They made 50,000. They're going to have to go move into somewhere that's like a basement suite somewhere. Okay. They move into a basement suite, and that's not really that fair. At least the judge is going to be like, well, they're going to need spousal. They're going to need like some sort of uplifting of their income so they can like figure it out. And like, what if they quit their job for 2 years? Say the child's like 3 years old and the person wasn't even working for the last 3 years. They're going to look at their last 3 years of notice of assessments and be like, well, they made nothing. But then they're going to be like, but they can work now, but are they expected to work a lot? So again, there's like a lot of variances which can affect spousal, but once child support is taken care of, then you're going to do a spousal after, okay? And then spousal after is like how much money is left. Because again, now if you have this person that was making 100, but now they were relying on the other person to care for the child, and now they have to pay for daycare, which gets added to a special expense. So you're going to have to do your form of all your expenses, and then the court is going to kind of get an idea of what's happening, and then they're going to be like, okay, well, you can't really give that much spousal, or say they are entitled to more spousal because they didn't work, because they quit their job and their career and everything, so they need more help to bring them up, or maybe they need less. Maybe they've been working the whole time. but they still make less, but they should still get spousal because they have to figure everything out. So maybe they'll get it for a year. It could be anywhere from, if you were together for like say three years, it could be anywhere from like a year and a half to 6 years that you have to pay them spousal. So it depends on like, the circumstances. But they'll do like an interim order most likely. Interim just means temporary. So your family management conference, they're just going to be like, we're just going to throw out your tax returns and like, this is just what it's going to be for now. They'll go on the conservative end if you're trying to impute their income. So say, okay, you have a person, it's more complicated, that earns like a tax exempt income or earns, tax exempt income is a pretty big one. So they have tax exempt income. Well, then the judge is going to look at it and be like, well, if you made 100,000, typically a normal person, and that's how the federal support guidelines for child support figured out, typically a normal person would only take home 70 because of tax, but you keep the whole 100. So we're going to say you make 130 instead because you keep that extra, and we're going to go by that table amount instead. So they have to justify varying the table amount, but they can impute you. That's called imputing income. Or if the guy's like, oh, I make 100,000, but I hurt my hand, I got carpal tunnel now, so I have to get a different job. Instead of 100,000, I make 30. Actual case, by the way. I'm not sure if I can cite it, but it actually happened. A guy said he had to go to art school or something because he had carpal tunnel, and he was like an engineer, computer engineer. And then the judge was like, not buying it. Anyways, whoa, see, what a whirlwind of just dealing with that one issue. And now you're in court, and now you've gone to justice counselors, and you've done all this crap, and like, you're just done. Like at this point, like family management conferences, a lot of people are done. And the other thing too is like, it ends up becoming like a mud slinging fest. It ends up being like people being like, well, he used to leave beers all around and I don't want the kid to be around that. Or like, he's dirty, I don't want the kid to be around someone that smells weird. And then they start bringing up stuff about how they swore at each other during the breakup, and like then the judge has to decide, is this like violent or is this just like the breakdown of a relationship, and then they're being rude to each other. And sometimes you have to like give orders that you can't be rude to each other. So the whole thing is just crazy. I would say my biggest critique of the whole system is that it's super complicated. I just explained to you one thing, and that's just spousal support. That does, and child support. And I didn't even get into the details of the sections of where like someone claims undue hardship, other person does imputing, one person quit for school. Like there's so much that digs into that. And these are all rules that you don't even know about when you get into it. And getting legal advice to deal with all this stuff can be expensive in itself. Proper, true legal advice with a complex situation of imputing income and all that stuff, and maybe they're self-employed, they own their own business, and it just gets to be a real headache. And then this is assuming that you're both like somewhat normal. If one of the people is really, really weird, like they're hiding a bunch of money, like there was one case I read about where the woman, she had done basically that. She quit everything, and the guy ended up accumulating millions of dollars in assets and claiming he made like 70K a year or something. And he showed up with like, it was like a $12,000 watch or something to the hearing. And the judge was like, I know that watch. He probably had 3 of them. Judges are kind of rich, but maybe. But yeah, he was like, I know that watch. You make a lot more money than you look. And he ended up awarding like $100,000 or something, but it ended up being like minuscule. And the fact that this person accumulated this much wealth over that amount of time, keeping in mind, this was actually like 7 or 8 years after the child had matured. They're like, yeah, like 24 or 25 or something. See, even more complicated rules. What if your child is 22 years old and they're still in college? You still got to pay child support? Yeah, you do. You still have to go with special expense? Yeah, you do. See, exactly. It is crazy. And this is a huge problem. I find that access with this information is it's just too much. And then for someone to have to pay for all that when they're dealing with the stress already of like, oh, now I have my kid, and like you really, if you want to talk about like benefit of the child, specifically benefit of the child, then What would really benefit the child is keeping the parents from fighting and keeping the parents stress free. The breakdown of the relationship is hard enough. And also, courts are expensive. Yes, it's free for me to go file something, or I could just apply and get my fees waived and free affidavits in family court, and then I'm attending. But like, it costs the courts a lot of money. Now we got a judge making $260,000 a year sitting on the bench, and then and usually these are half day hearings that they've done for their FMC, right? So now you've just paid another 1,000, and then plus the court recorder, and then they're going to make their order and they're going to send it out, and it's just a super expensive process. It makes way more sense, in my opinion. So this is where I guess we're going to start coming to a close because I'm trying to make this video shorter. It makes way more sense to have a system where you keep people out of court, like high priority, way higher priority, keep people out of court. Do not let them go to the family management conference, or if they do have to go to the family management conference, try to get someone else to go for them. This is basically free legal representation, but I think there shouldn't be an amount of money, especially when it comes to child issues, that is required to bring these issues forward. I think that, even if you make like 100K a year and the other person makes 50K a year, as my example, you should just be able to go to the Justice Access Center. They should be able to pull everything up. And if you disagree, you're going to have to provide your information anyway. Discovery, they call it, is pretty required to bring an argument, or not an argument, to get a just decision. They need all your financials. That's a given. When you're splitting assets, when you're figuring out child support, like financials are going to be the number one. Like how much money is sitting there? How much money does everyone make? How much money can you make? Is there a change in circumstance? All that other stuff. They need to know all this information. You can provide all this to a counselor. You can provide all this out without paying for a mediator. Keep in mind, you also have mediation, but mediation costs money. It's expensive. Mediation you have to pay a lawyer, like a good mediator. Like you're paying them like, $500-$700 an hour to mediate, and then they mediate and they do collaborative law. Now you got two lawyers, and basically what you've done is now you've thrown a $40,000 tax on their separation, right? And a lot of people get really upset about that. No, understandably, it's pretty hard. And the standard to qualify for legal aid to get this for free is really, really low. When I say low, I mean you have to be really, really poor and have no money to qualify. If you have a house, you're selling that house. If you have money in the bank, that money's gone. Basically, it's the court's opinion that it's your responsibility. But let's talk about the child for a second. Well, for one, the child's parents' savings are getting just thrown out the door. For two, the system is super freaking complicated. Like, it is aggressively complicated. Again, I just brought up only child support. Now let's talk about assets. Now let's talk about asset appreciation. Let's talk about a family asset, an excluded asset, a gift. Let's talk about a trust fund. Let's talk about a trust fund that's controlled by your parents specifically, and that only sometimes they give you money, or it's under a certain condition that you might not meet. Like, these are all actual things that get brought forward. So that's how complicated the system is. And again, to drag somebody and drag a family through this system is just traumatizing. What needs to happen, for sure, is it needs to be way easier to get access to justice. You should be able to just go into the Justice Access Center, and they should be able to help you with all of that, and even be like, oh, you have work? Okay, well, then you don't have to attend. Just sign this affidavit. I can take it for you, and then I'll go for you, and I'll take your financials, and I'll tell you what happened, because you have work, and you might lose your job, and you're new because you haven't worked in how long, and you're going to get fired because you've only been there for 4 months, and now you got to take a day off for court. And again, that's also personal. Now you got to tell them I have to go to court, right? Again, the whole thing is just illogical. It makes more sense to keep somebody out of the system, give justice counselor maybe a little bit more power. They have quite a bit of power in terms of being able to draft agreements. But then again, you can just have an agreement between two people anyway. You can draft one up and you can sign it in front of a notary. It's best to seek independent legal advice, especially if someone's waiving spousal support, because they can bring an argument later and be like, it's unfair. So you want a fair argument, you want a fair agreement, but still, agreement you can just make anyway. But it would be really helpful if, again, the system was like, you're separating, you're going to go in the Justice Access Center, and someone's going to sit you down and be like, hey, it's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. We're going to figure this out. And then, what lawyers are supposed to do is start to figure out, like, is this person in a dangerous situation? Is this person, are they going to start disposing of assets, wasting of assets, they call it? Then you got to get an order to stop them from wasting assets. Ugh. See, it's a lot of stuff, but all this stuff, a normal person has no idea what the hell's happening, right? And this is something that so many people go through that it is nuts, like how many people go through this. You should be able to go in. It should be a service kind of like, it's my opinion, kind of like the police. You tell the police what happened, and I mean, they should theoretically, they should listen and not. They don't expect you to know the law, and they will take your complaints or whatever you're going through, and they will help you through the system. They will push you through it. They'll be like, okay, well, you complained that this person did this, and basically they help you get through. You don't have to have a vast knowledge, and you don't have to have money. Well, if you want to talk about benefiting the kids, that's what you need. There needs to be no cap. Like, someone has to be able to go in and at least figure out those basic elements. And then if you're going to talk about asset division, okay, well, then maybe you should pay. I mean, maybe, again, it's one of those balancing things, because if someone's got a whole bunch of money and they're trying to split assets, I mean, yeah, I can understand that one, but at least everything else should be free and easy to deal with. Even the original orders to get someone to not waste assets and to freeze everything, to stop the person from selling all their stocks and blowing it all gambling. Or even if they're not doing that, like selling the house or just destroying the house, like with a hammer, right? You can get orders for all that kind of stuff. And that should all be easily done through the Justice Access Center, in my opinion. You should be able to go there. They help you, and they tell you, don't worry about it. Listen, you have a child, and this child, you need to take care of that child. This child doesn't need to see you stressed out every single day. They don't need to see you crying all the time about, like, what am I going to do with my job? What am I going to do about daycare? What am I going to do about special expenses? They need someone to sit you down and be like, look, we're going to handle this. We're going to take care of this. And you're not going to be $100,000 in debt. Just don't worry about it. We'll get you to that point. And then when you are at the point that you have to divide the family house and like the family cat because it's considered property, the family cat's considered property for now. However, just recently they've said there's how is this in March? They have decided to bring it forward. Wait, I'm gonna find this. It is a very changes to Family Law Act. I was just reading this online. They decided to bring in more. They've suggested to make amendments to the Family Law Act to actually talk about the pet themselves and how to split the pet, and whether or not, like, the pet spends more time with one person, how the pet was acquired. They're starting to look at the pet as like a member of the family rather than just like an asset that you cut in half. So, anyways, yeah. So hopefully this has helped you a little bit if you're like trying to, or you're going through divorce, trying to divorce. Hopefully it's helped you a little bit if you're like watching and you're like panicked because you're like, what do I do? Well, first, just go to the Justice Access Center. It is horribly complicated, as I'm telling you, but at least like go there and give it a start. It can be a lot better. It should be a lot better. In my opinion, it's horrible, but at least there's a little bit of a start for you. And and hopefully at some point, in my opinion, this is my conclusion to the whole thing. So in conclusion, it's my official conclusion. We need to make some amendments to the act. Again, we need more easier access. We need to be able to bring families to a further point in the court process for free, to alleviate the stress. Also think about like the timeline too, right? Like when you first separate, the first 6 months are horrible. Like it's horrible. Doesn't matter if you had kids or not. It doesn't even matter if you have money in it or not. It's still horrible. The human aspect must be considered with the law. You must understand that people have feelings. And when you have children and all this other stuff, like help this person get through it, and then prevent childhood trauma. That's the whole point, right? Best interest of the child. Well, that's best interest. And then, I guess like one of my big problems with the Family Law Act is the common law thing, if you don't have children. So this is where it's kind of like, you don't have children at all. Like if you have children, it's a big, whole different story. I just went on a huge rant about if you have kids. But if you don't have kids and you're together for 2 years and now your asset appreciation, you have to divide it in half. And now anything you've made, you have to divide in half if you still have it. So if you saved 100,000, you got to divide 50. The other person saved up 20 because they decided to go to Vegas a whole bunch of times. You have the same income, but they went to Vegas. but now you have to pay them to even it out. I don't like it. I think 2 years is too short. And plus, nobody, like, not nobody, but a lot of people aren't having kids. I know lots of people nowadays that are just not having children. Okay. They don't want kids. They're too much work. They can't afford kids because kids are thousands of dollars a month now. They're just insanely expensive. So people are like, I just don't want it. And then you live together, and then and now you're like, okay, well, we're approaching our 2 year, and we're about to be legislated into a contractual joint partnership with everything we do financially. So, what do we do? What an awkward conversation to have with your partner that you've been dating for a year, or that, well, I guess, yeah, moving in immediately is pretty quick. But let's say dating a year and a half, moved in for a year. That's still a pretty awkward conversation. Hey, let's do a cohab agreement. No, I don't. I don't like it. I think that it should be the other way around. I think that unless you've been together for 5 years, or it's like such a long period of time that, like, 5 years is even pretty tough, because if you don't have kids, like, again, this isn't the 60s anymore. We're 2024. People make their own money. People live their own lives. People have split finances. Like, if you have a joint bank account and you're buying things with that joint bank account, then you can say that, like, it should be split 50-50. That makes total sense. But if you don't, then, why are you splitting everything? It doesn't make sense. If they got their bank account, you have your bank account, they have their job, you have your job, and you both contribute to rent, like, equally, or however you decide to do it, and it's just renting, then what the hell? Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. In my opinion, it should not go like that at all. In my opinion, you should be able to opt in to it. And, like, say, for example, a simple system, you get a joint bank account. And say you move in with your girlfriend and she already owns her condo. And now you're going to start contributing, $800 a month to it. Well, let's just both put it in a joint bank account. And then whatever comes out of that is what goes. That's my contribution. That makes way more sense. That's how it used to be. But again, the old system, when you're with somebody for 20 years, didn't make sense. I feel like there just needs to be a little bit more movement in the system. A little bit up from 2 years, because it's a little shocking and a little quick. And maybe some more opportunity to enter in a contract with somebody separately. Again, joint bank accounts, putting your name, buying a house together. That's a pretty obvious 50-50 split in the asset, unless, again, you have a prenuptial agreement that says that it's going to be 80-20 because they're contributing more. That's a prenup, or a cohab, or whatever. That's just a contract. Again, opting into a 50-50, or not opting in, being forced, legislated into a 50-50 after 2 years. I think we need to put that in the past. This was brought in 11 years ago now. It's 2013. It was first brought forward in 2011 is when it was its first reading. Yeah, this stuff needs to go. So, anyways, hopefully you enjoyed my video. Hopefully you see how complicated it is, and you're like, I just, Ocean can't deal with this situation. Yeah, yeah. Anyways, have a good day, and I don't know how to end these very well, so I'm just going to say thanks for watching. And if you're going through something right now, it sucks. Sorry to hear that, but go talk to a justice counselor, and maybe you can get some free counseling. Free counseling might be helpful, or just complain to your friends. But yeah. All right. Have a good day. Bye.